So, you're curious about Trails through Daybreak 2 but are wondering if it's worth it? Let's take a look at what's to offer in the next installment in the Nation of Calvert to find out if it's worth your time. First off, the Trails Off series is some of the most ambitious JRPGs out there, having this huge scope with a concurrent narrative taking place between different nations. Daybreak 2 is no different from this, taking place 2 months after the events of the previous game. Personally, for someone who's very invested in this series, these games really offer something that you can't get anywhere else. Having each installment build off from one another results in this very narrative-rich world with tons of colourful characters to interact with. If you're new to this series or need a refresher, then Daybreak 2 offers a lot of moments where they go over the events of the previous games, with it even starting with an in-universe recap that's fully voice acted from Daybreak 1. Of course, given how narratively dense this series is, the story recaps don't go over every single detail, but they give the audience a good enough idea of what's going on so far in the story. Getting into the game itself, Daybreak 2 has you continuing your goal, which was established from the previous installment, having you find in the 8th Genesis after locating 7 of them. The central gimmick this time around is this Groundhog Day inspired narrative similar to something like ReZero or AI The Somnium Files, however here it's presented in a very linear, easy way to understand. Whenever the timeline splits or changes, it's never because of the player's actual choice, instead being dictated by what happens in the narrative. As a result of this, due to it being linear, it can sometimes be a little strange since you purposely have to lose the first attempt in order to repeat the cycle for the solution, unlike something like AI The Somnium Files. I will say however that this more linear approach does make moments where the timeline splits become less predictable as you progress through the story. Keeping this video spoiler free of course, some moments in this narrative really caught me off guard because of this. The presentation throughout this series only seems to be getting better and better with each installment, and I can safely say that Daybreak 2 is no exception to this, with the English dub in particular being very notable. This dub really is top notch, with them bringing back all the voices to keep consistency with the characters that are reintroduced in this game. Granted, a few moments in this script did catch me off guard at times.
It's not like I don't trust S to be faithful, but I'd better start upping my raise just to be sure.
Upping your what?
Smaller aspects for this game's presentation really helps the whole world come to life, such as the stellar character designs and animations, with it all running at a smooth 60 frames per second. My experience with this title was with the PlayStation 5 version, and performance wise everything is very stellar here, with load times in particular being practically non-existent. Another notable aspect of this story is with the side quests. These are a huge focus in this series, with NPCs later acknowledging certain side quests that you did with them. Like previous installments, they can be a mixed bag at times, but they're definitely worth going out of your way to do, since some of these stories are very great self-contained experiences. If you're the kind of player to mash text boxes and skip through lots of NPC dialogue, well first I'd ask if you're a fan of JRPGs in the first place, but the Tales of series definitely won't appeal to you in this aspect. These kinds of games are definitely targeted towards people who want a story-rich experience, really taking their time between chapters to experience everything that there is to offer. On top of this, the alignment system is back from Daybreak 1, which gives you the option to choose how to deal with these NPCs' issues. Daybreak 2 further adds more distractions from the main objectives, such as fishing and hacking minigames. This time around, you don't just focus on the main character of the previous game being Van, but instead switch between different protagonists to see their perspective throughout the story. I really like this narrative decision since it really sets the game apart from its previous installment. Getting more screen time out of characters such as Swin and Nadia, who had a very pivotal role in Reverie, was a very welcome addition here. If you're a veteran of these games, then you'll definitely understand just how amazing it is seeing these characters age and change visually throughout this series. This series probably has the largest ensemble cast out there, and moments like this where you get to see them change throughout the narrative is a very good payoff for those that are invested. Moving on to the combat of Daybreak 2, and let me just say that this installment is objectively the best in the series. Once again, like Daybreak 1, you'll be engaging with the hybrid-centered action and turn-based JRPG combat system. This may look a little overwhelming at first, but it's really interesting how you can pick with how you want to engage with the enemy. On the action side of things, you'll be rolling between attacks alongside charging your moves to deal damage to the enemy. Newly introduced in Daybreak 2 is the addition of having you tag team between dodges to deal even more stun damage, alongside having your magic moves in the actual action side of things. If you lean towards the more modern side of action JRPGs, then this might be for you, however the turn-based system is where this game truly shines. There's so much to talk about here, way more than the scope of this video, but let me just mention the newly introduced aspects that I really enjoyed. New to Daybreak 2 are the EX combos, which reward stunning the enemy alongside really good positioning. Once again, combat is extremely flashy, and Daybreak 2 introduces even more party members, allowing you to customize so many different experiences for the combat. These games all build off from one another, and that's definitely evident in the combat. It might seem overwhelming to a newcomer, but it's worth getting into since there really is nothing like it. Another huge overhaul to the combat system in Daybreak 2 is with the central dungeon, which is back from the Cold Steel games and acts very similar to the Reverie corridor mechanic. If you're a fan of JRPGs, then you're probably already familiar with these huge central dungeons, which acts very similar to Mementos from Persona 5 or Tartarus from Persona 3. Similar to those titles, each chapter will open up a new floor and is your main means to tackle in the story content, which is pretty challenging. But unlike those games, the central dungeon here is pretty fast paced and allows you to pick different routes to really shake things up. Also, each floor looks very different from one another, allowing for some very nice visual diversity. Some settings in particular already had my jaw drop, with this one sun setting in particular being a really good example of this. The central dungeon is also a really convenient narrative solution in order to have your entire party playable at once. It's set as this online space, allowing for characters to conveniently drop in and drop out through their phones. On top of that, you can also further buff your characters with this skill tree-like mechanic. Throughout exploring the different floors and defeating enemies, you'll be rewarded with character-specific materials that let you further strengthen them. So far with my time with this game, I'm definitely certain that this is my favourite central dungeon that I've played in any JRPG, since it really spices things up and never overstays its welcome. With all that being said, that begs the ultimate question: should you play Trails through Daybreak 2? On one hand, this video is a catch-22 since Trails fans are already invested in this series and will buy it, but on the other hand, for a newcomer, there is an argument to be made here through the in-game story recaps that you can start with this title, however you will be skimming over the incredibly written narrative that takes place between different characters, times, and continents. Unlike JRPG series such as Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest where you can jump in with any installment, the Trails of games are a huge interconnected narrative. It's kind of a double-edged sword really, since these titles offer an incredible story that really rewards people that have stuck by it over the years. But as a result of this, and the games being 100 hours to beat, it's always been a hard sell for newcomers. This game really goes out of its way to fill in the blanks for newcomers, but of course if you ask any diehard fan of this series, they will tell you to start from the beginning, but the choice is ultimately yours. This video is to just help you guide that decision. However, if you do want to start here, you definitely can't jump in blind. There is plenty of material with in-game synopsis of previous installments, so you will have to at least look things up. It definitely comes with a few caveats, but as a huge fan of the Trails of games, I definitely want more eyes on this series, and any way to really get into them is a good way to jump in. Just be aware that you will be confused, however there is material out there to help you understand everything, and the best way will always be to start from the beginning, but I do think if you want to start here that it is completely possible. I definitely don't want to come off as gatekeeping with these statements, so at the end of the day the choice is ultimately yours. As a huge fan of JRPGs, 2025 is already looking incredibly stacked when it comes to releases, with Trails through Daybreak 2 being the first knockout of this year. I really have nothing bad to say about this title, with my current playthrough being around 50ish hours. I'll definitely be finishing this one with some plans to do a full review sometime in the future, so please stay tuned if this interests you. I would say that in my opinion that Trails through Daybreak 2 is definitely worth it and it's one of the best JRPGs to come out. It definitely appeals to a very specific niche audience, but if you're a part of this then you'll definitely appreciate this title. But what are some of your thoughts on this series? Are you interested in Daybreak 2? I'm curious. Also, any feedback on this video would be appreciated. Thank you so much for watching and I hope you have a nice rest of your day.